All right, Adam Benigni, joined by Vic Carucci from the home office, and we are counting down now as we record this. It is Friday afternoon. It is the Bills and the Jets Monday night to open the season. Monday Night Football at MetLife Stadium. Vic, how are you?
I am great, Adam, and excited to get it going.
All right, we're going to get some. Well, you know what? I think we'll start to get some answers to some questions. Not all the questions, because openers tend to be fluky. We've seen that through the years. So much parity in the league, and Aaron Rodgers made the point on Thursday. Teams really forming their own identity, particularly over the first 3-4 games of a season. So I think anyway, you have to be careful to not read too much into this matchup. And I do think, let's start with Aaron Rodgers, who's the focal point. I do think the Bills have an advantage in facing the Jets early, where Rodgers is playing his first regular season game with his new team.
Yeah, look, it's still one of 17 games, but it is very important from the NFL perspective, from ESPN's perspective, to trot Aaron Rodgers out on the national stage and let everybody see the savior of the New York Jets. That is how this is being built. This is really the Aaron Rodgers game in so many ways, and the expectation that he's going to elevate this team that has been irrelevant for so long and get it over the top, get it not only into contention, but possibly into the Super Bowl. That's a lot on Aaron Rodgers, as great as his career has been, and a lot on his team, the Jets. But we're going to start getting some indication, at least, of where they are in the pecking order of the AFC, East and the AFC in general, which, for the most part, the division, of course, has been owned by the Bills. And the Bills have been the team to beat, supposedly, as far as the entire conference is concerned. We're gonna get some answers to those questions. Not all of them, but some.
Rodgers said yesterday that he thinks, in realistically looking at the Jets locker room, they're one of 6 to 12 teams that are truly contending for the Super Bowl. Do you see it that way?
I would agree that they're in the swath as long as you widen it out to about a dozen teams. I'm not sure I have them necessarily in a top 6 area, but I do think when you rate these lists, you're using quarterbacks as the factor. And Rodgers certainly merits that kind of credit, but he's with a new team. He has a lot to figure out still with his new teammates, with the whole surrounding of the Jets and playing in New York/New Jersey, all of that. It's a big change for a guy who has spent his career in Green Bay. And even though he has been a national figure, he has risen up well above Green Bay and the Packers as an individual. This is a whole different story. And this is an entirely different level of attention that's on him. So from my standpoint, yes, I think the Jets are going to be in the conversation for the postseason, but I'm stopping short. I'm way short of others who have them not only either winning the division, but getting to the Super Bowl.
Let's take it into an X's and O's level and that discussion for the moment here again, pertaining to the matchup with Rodgers taking over at quarterback for the Jets. We'll get to the New York defense in a moment, which is a whole other conversation. But as the Bills line up, Sean McDermott now calling the Buffalo defense. Obviously, they don't have Von Miller for at least the first 4 games of the regular season. They've still made some good investment in that pass rush. I think this is a situation where they absolutely have to take advantage of what has been a very suspect New York offensive line.
This will be a game where the Bills pass rush has to rise to the occasion as much as ever. And look, when we last saw it play a game that mattered, we didn't see that. In fact, it was a disaster, and Joe Burrow just carved the Bills up as a result of the lack of pressure. This is where it has to start. When you are truly playing yet another offensive line that is, quote, suspect. We thought the Bengals O-line was too in that playoff game, but this line has had its issues, and if anything causes the entire Aaron Rodgers situation to falter, at least at the beginning of the year, it starts with this offensive line. So I anticipate a lot of aggressiveness from the Bills' defensive front, from the play calling of Sean McDermott, whether it is the kinds of stunts and games that you do with your D linemen, the blitzing that you incorporate. You bring defensive backs. We saw some of that in the preseason. Whatever he's got concocted for this game, I think we're going to see it. And I think we're going to get, if anything, in terms of true signs, we're going to know that this is a different Bills defense than we have seen under his predecessor as defensive coordinator, Leslie Frazier.
Earlier this week, the Bills McDermott announced he's going to go with some inexperience at three key positions, two of them on the defensive side of the ball. You know, Osiris Torrance, the guard, offensive lineman, second-round pick. But defensively, the point I want to make here, Christian Benford at the number 2 corner spot. And there was some indication of that. We've seen him in that role before. But Terrell Bernard at middle linebacker, a guy who had an injured hamstring and didn't play in any of the preseason games. That's the biggest decision Sean McDermott had to make on the defensive side. The guy who's at the heart of his defense, the communicator, the guy who's going to help him call things and get things set up. That is a major show of faith in a young player, a former third-round pick. How do you see that playing out, particularly early on against a veteran quarterback like Rodgers?
Look, with all of these 3 new starters, these are projections. These are coaches looking at these players, and especially Sean McDermott, and saying that they have the goods to be starters in the NFL. You're not going to know that, of course, until they play. And yes, the biggest leap of faith is at this middle linebacker position. They really like Terrell Bernard, and why not? He showed them enough to be a third-round pick. That's a premium choice. They've always had him earmarked to be a starter, and he hadn't really made the strongest case for that to happen. They wanted it definitive. They wanted separation. They didn't really get that. And then, of course, the injury comes into play, the hamstring that slows the whole process down. But when they were looking at all the middle linebacker candidates they had, and especially Tyrel Dodson, who seemed to be the guy that, at least by default, might be the one who started the season, for them to go and for McDermott to go with Bernard right out of the gate, it makes a loud statement about the faith they have in him, first athletically, physically, that he can get the job done. But it's bigger than that. He is the guy with whom Sean McDermott will be communicating in Sean's first official game as defensive coordinator, and all of the signal calling, all of the adjusting, all of the mental part of this defense is going to flow through Terrell Bernard. So if there are assignments that are missed, you see any gaping holes that result in a big run, all those things that happen, or a miss on a pass rush or something, a blitz, these are the kinds of things that will reflect on this decision.
One more point on the defense before we flip things to the other side of the ball. And I talked about Christian Benford. Again, that's a 6th-round pick out of Villanova last year who's shown a lot of promise, dealt with an oblique injury as well. And I think you'll see kind of a rotation there. I mean, I do think you'll see Dane Jackson and Kaiir Elam, a 1st-round pick, by the way, last year, who really has not developed as they had hoped at this point in the games at various points. I do want to talk about the return and kind of the reuniting, if you will, of the 3 big veterans, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, who's had some back soreness, but said in no way would that keep him out of the game, said that emphatically on Thursday, and a healthy Tre'Davious White back as your lockdown number 1 cornerback. I guess how much does that change with those 3 reunited and back in the secondary? How much does that change the way this defense is going to be played and executed, and how much tougher are they to operate against as far as Rodgers is concerned?
Well, the first thing is you are facing a quarterback who is as great, not good, but great, as reading defenses as any the game has ever seen. His decision-making will be precise most of the time, and it will probably be hastened by the issues that I expect this Jets offensive line to present in pass protection for him. But you have these veteran players on the back end, and what they're able to do in terms of discouraging throws because of tight coverage, or at least being challenged and challenging against this group of Jet receivers. You've got a mixture of experience and youth, but a lot of talent. And it's going to really come down to, I think, everybody holding their responsibilities. Again, knowing that this pass rush for Buffalo needs all the help it can get, at least based on what we saw last season. Maybe players, the incumbents, will be better, but you still don't have Von Miller, who was the best pass rusher they had in the lineup. The coverage can assist that, obviously. Yes, Aaron Rodgers is going to pick on that other side at cornerback. He's going to go after Christian Benford. Why not? Lack of experience compared to White, lesser talent, presumably. But Benford's solid. And I agree that there will be points probably during the season where they'll do some rotating. I don't know how much of that they're going to want to do out right off the bat against the Jets, working in Dane Jackson, working in Kaiir Elam, mainly because I don't think they want to disrupt the chemistry that is there, assuming that it starts out in a good place.
All right, let's talk about the Bills' offense. And if you look at a defense that they faced in both of the games last year, the Jets' defense, which is so much a part of really the optimism surrounding this team that has a lot of people suggesting that they could win this division and be true contenders. The Bills had a very difficult time dealing with a young, athletic, dynamic defense that reflects the approach and the mentality of the head coach as well. I think you will get a truer sense because of the transition that Rodgers is in the midst of to a new offense early in the season. I'm not so sure how much I'd read into whatever success the Bills might have against New York defensively. I really am anxious to see how the Buffalo offense, with some of its new pieces, operates against a defense that gave them a very difficult time in both of those games, which they, of course, split last year.
If you had to point to one of the most troubling trends for Buffalo last season, it was their inability to be effective against this Jet defense. They just didn't have the answer. And this Jet defense was dominant in both games, even though they split the series. And you look at the matchup up front, Quinnen Williams and company. Look, it wasn't all that complicated what they did schematically. It was just physical dominance. They were able to win their one-on-ones, as coaches like to say. And that is where Buffalo's offensive line has to stand taller than it was. And then in terms of the weapons and Josh Allen, they too have to rise to the occasion, find a way to make plays against Sauce Gardner, one of the best corners already in the NFL, and he's only going into his second season. They have to show that this defense doesn't have their number as thoroughly as it looked last year. It will be a hard call because this is one of the better defenses in the NFL, and it's no shame for an offense necessarily to struggle against that. But this is your AFC East rival, or one of them, and if you're going to not only stay atop that division, but make sure that they don't rise above you or are equal with you down the stretch, you have to make these statements now. You have to show that you can win those matchups as much physically as anything else. And then it's on Ken Dorsey and his play calling and his scheming against this defense to find answers that weren't there last year, studying that tape so thoroughly from those last two games against the Jets and saying, okay, this is a weakness we can exploit. And this is how we got to change things up with however a play was designed or run. And the new people. Here is, you have Osiris Torrance at guard. You have Connor McGovern at that other guard spot. Effectively, those two players, that interior beefing up was meant for this matchup right off the bat. Yes, for other games too, but right off the bat, physically, they want to see those guys rise to the occasion. And I think Torrance is in this lineup as much as anything because of the physical beast he can be, especially in run blocking.
Yeah, well, that's just it. I mean, you talked about how it all fits together, and they have to do a better job of winning on the line of scrimmage. I mean, the number of key losses, Sean McDermott would immediately point to that area. That was a concerted effort to beef up and upgrade the offensive line. We'll see how they're able to execute, because they need, when you're going against a defense, any defense, but especially one like New York's, where physically there's such a premium and they're so athletic and they're young and they're dynamic, they really need to be able to run the ball. And they've addressed that area, obviously. You know, James Cook, is he ready to take the next step? Damian Harris, Latavius Murray, that sort of a thing, the run blocking that you referenced. And Dalton Kincaid, I think you're going to see him targeted early and often. I think it's going to be baptism by fire in the NFL. I think they need him to make an immediate contribution in the middle of the field.
Absolutely, they have to attack that middle, if nothing else, to let the Jets defense know that they can go there and will go there. This is also very much on Josh Allen, as it is on Kincaid being the effective target. Allen has to have that patience, has to maneuver his way in that pocket to make those plays. That is something Patrick Mahomes does as well as anybody. And, you know, you saw when he did not have his best middle target in Travis Kelce the other night, how that affected things for the Chiefs. But the truth is, you still saw him making some of those throws to the other middle people who stepped up or tried to step up. It wasn't good enough for the Chiefs. But the point is, this is what the Bills want. They want that combination of Allen to Kincaid and Allen to other players in the middle of the field. Dawson Knox, don't forget about him, to be another element of their offense that the defense has to worry about. Yeah, you got Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis on the perimeter, and they want to attack downfield, but they need that. They also have to have something in the way of a run game to slow down what the Jets are bringing in the way of a pass rush. And we'll know something right off the bat, I think, as far as how this run game is going to operate. Have those changes in the offensive line made it better? Are you going to see from James Cook another level, a more experienced player who knows how to run better? Is Damian Harris going to make the kind of difference, perhaps even in short yardage situations or in other areas where his explosiveness, his power comes to the fore?
Yeah, I think, and it gets back to the point, I think much more about the nature of this matchup is going to be revealed with the Bills offense going against the Jets defense right out of the gate this year, based on what happened last year. All right, Vic Carucci, we appreciate it as always. Vic is with us weekly, Monday nights at 7:30, Sports Talk Live, Buffalo. You can also read his work at WGRZ.com. Vic, thanks so much, and thanks for joining us here at WGRZ Plus and WGRZ.com.